So welcome everybody. Welcome to the counter narrative. This is the discussion on radioactive, and this is part 2 of a 3-part series. Today's topic is titled The Nuclear Boom. So we'll get into more information about it, but we actually would like to begin with a prayer, and Petuuch has agreed to give us a quick prayer this evening.
Shinime Petuuch, Uncle Mestata, Quasi Hopa, Wamatat troops is at Asi House in our Tranishoma, Gaitit Asi Coast, Amu Sish Kahana James, message could state to us as a height. Who I may imitate question says, Sipinaches, Dutcham Jazz, Kachana, Jenna, Commistate, how it is. The Mayan Statan, Katanish. Imitation Shawanos, imitate was name or trying to which is trying to come page, come state, MC Tawash, and as a which is trying to come hope I could image how to see from a see the could always stand from a see in the new water could emit to game and see just 110 musical hearts as stated Tawash and as a page to shame it's a group system as how to shame it Petuuch as a John Hannes years in the district contest with the coast out in the conversation. So just I quite thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So as I said, today's topic is the nuclear boom. So I have with me our 2 very esteemed panelists that are very knowledgeable on this subject about just kind of what happened when nuclearism kind of hit New Mexico and just kind of that whole chain and where we are at today. So kind of that little gambit right there in the middle of the height of uranium mining and nuclear science. So we have with us today Petuuch Gilbert from Acoma, as well as Marian Naranjo from Santa Clara. I wanted to give all of our attendees a little bit of information. So the format of the counter narrative, I really like to encourage you guys to submit questions. We like this to be a dialogue with our panelists and to tailor this conversation to really what you guys would like to hear and know, as well as a good blend with what Petuuch and Marian think are important for you to know on the topic as well. So on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a question and answer tab. If you want to pull that up, you're welcome to put in your questions there, and we'll be moderating from there, as well as there's another little tab for the chat. So as you get comfortable, I encourage everybody, I appreciate seeing where everybody's signing in from. So drop into the chat where you're visiting, logging in from. So we can kind of see the breadth of all of that. So again, just drop that into the chat. You can type it in and make sure you send it to all, at least the panelists, but all attendees and panelists is beneficial. So we'll be watching out for those. So with that was a very quick introduction, but I want to turn the time over for our panelists to introduce themselves. So giving them about 5 minutes to introduce themselves a little bit more. I know we have some of their bios posted on our website, but we'll go ahead and start with Petuuch, if you don't mind introducing yourself a little bit more and why you're joining us today.
Sure. We really need this conversation about the nuclear issues. And I was saying earlier to Rachel, to Marianne, this issue of nuclearism really is not, I think, attended to enough by indigenous peoples. And even though it's affected our livelihood, we really do need to be talking about it. I think especially here in New Mexico. So I'm glad that this is occurring. Thank you, Rachel, and to the Indian Political Conscience Center for holding this session. Petuuch is actually an Acoma word. I won't tell you exactly what it means, but it's one of those beautiful sandstone mesas that if you see in the Acoma Valley. I'm a lifelong resident here. And so you know, I've been affected. Our people have been affected by uranium and its ensuing development. My father once told me that when he was on top of the Acoma Mesa, he saw something to the east, to the north southeast, and he thought that that was the explosion of the first atomic bomb that occurred, a big flash of light in the air. And we never, as Alchemists, we never really talked about it, but generally it's affected our lives. So definitely we do need to be engaged in this effort. I once worked at the Anaconda uranium mine. I mean the mill site, not very long, maybe a year. And so I saw how yellow cake is produced. And I'm aligned with organizations now, two organizations. One is called the Multicultural Alliance for Safe Environment. That's very much involved with uranium, the past uranium mines, and I'll talk about that. And the Laguna Acoma Coalition for a Safe Environment. So two organizations that are very involved on the issue of uranium, especially. And then with the United Nations, I'm president of a United Nations NGO. It's called Indigenous World Association. And we've been urging Indigenous people to put this as a primary issue on efforts and presentations that we give at the United Nations. And some of our colleagues have, gone to, the conference with the parties that specifically involved on nuclearism and nuclear issues. So that's who I am. And of course, I'm very open always to communicate with, especially Indigenous peoples and young people, to get involved in studying about nuclear issues. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Petuuch. And Marian, please introduce yourself.
My name is Marian Naranjo. Chapovi Toat Undi, my native name. I'm a tribal member to Chapo Winger Santa Clara Pueblo. I'm a mother of 4 and a grandma of 9. A lifetime traditional potter and founder director of Honor Our Pueblo Existence, or HOPE, a nonprofit organization located here at Chapo Winger. I have dedicated much of my life to understanding my cultural knowledge and daily work to apply this knowledge to the time we were all born into, the atomic age. I am present and humbled to express a point of view which many Pueblo people share. And I would like to begin with a cultural belief I was taught in the hope that all will have a clear understanding of the plight of Indigenous Pueblo people at this time. So I learned a whole lot of stories at the time of the atomic age when it began through my mentorship with potters here at Santa Clara. And that was really where, my knowledge came from, that I could do my life skills with once I couldn't do pots anymore. I did it for like 35 years and I started to hurt, and the potters told me because I was educated that I should use that once that starts, because my gift was I could speak from my heart. I never knew what that meant at the time, but when I became, an older woman, I totally understood the stories that they told me, and started walking that life. And the work really started in 1998 when a environmental group out of Santa Fe had won a lawsuit against the laboratory for not being in compliance with the Clean Air Act. And part of the lawsuit was they needed to hire a Native outreach director. So that was when I got to find out the answers to questions that I asked myself sitting, working with my clay about everything, why the government came here. And I even worked at the laboratory fresh out of high school. I was very good in science and worked there for a summer and didn't like it, but was very fortunate to get scholarships to UNM for nursing. So I think at this time, I want to turn it back over to my friend and colleague, Petuuch, to start us off with our uranium mining, since that's the first process that happens, in this atomic age, to get it to where more detrimental, it gets so detrimental from just disturbing that earth and the whole process, which is here in New Mexico, the whole process from the uranium to the waste. So, and then again, thank you, Petuuch, for our opening us up with prayer. It allowed to ask our ancestors to come and join us and surround us and guide us. We thank you, Kuta.
Before you take it over, Petuuch, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we have a lot of people signing in from New Mexico. Most of our signing in are from Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and there's a few from Colorado, as well as one I noticed from California. So just so you know your audience a little bit better. But with that, I'll go ahead and let you introduce us to uranium.
Sure. Of course, as you know, uranium is the front end of what is sometimes said to be the nuclear fuel cycle or the nuclear fuel chain. So the extraction of uranium from the ground is what starts off this whole nuclearism. And we know that uranium is a natural product. And there's always radioactivity on the ground here. And of course, from the sunlight. But it's when uranium is disturbed that's when it begins to be harmful. And even though I think the Navajo culture, talks about the uranium in their cultural ways, we at ICON never have learned of this until we were educated to learn about radioactivity. But the area of where we live in at Acoma is really between a large mining boom that occurred from the 50s until the 1990s about uranium mining that occurred at Laguna, our sister pueblo to the east, Laguna Pueblo, and to the west was where most of this uranium mining occurred. This whole region became known as the Grants Mining District. And EPA defined that area. And if people are knowledgeable, can look on the map, from the Rio Perco to the east, which is about 15 miles west of Albuquerque. From Rio Perco to the west, just following, the corridor of I-40. 25 miles generally on the north side of I-40 from the Rio Perco 100 miles to the west to Gallup. So approximately 2,500 square miles is this area that became known as the Grants Mining District. And sometimes I myself refer to as the Grants Uranium District. This is where, the uranium industry conducted its mining and milling. And EPA says that they identified 97 what they call abandoned uranium mines and 5 uranium mills. The mines, AUMs, abandoned uranium mines, are really mines that have lost contact as to who really mined those areas, but yet there are holes on the ground or shafts in the ground, and that still contaminate all of the area around it and even downstream. And so that's why then the EPA says that there's 97 within this Grants Mining District. Really, there's a whole lot more that are probably unidentified. And generally, the governments that really deal with this is the New Mexico Environment Department, and of course, the federal government, the Environmental Protection Agency. The well-known areas that really were mined and milled were transnational corporations. Some of the big ones will be like Anaconda. Anaconda mined the Jack Pile area at Laguna. And Laguna is probably some of you have heard, at one time was the world's largest open pit uranium mine. And as Rachel was telling me that, some of her relatives lived right next to the uranium mine. The village of Petuuch is right on, really adjacent and on the edge of this of the Jack Pine uranium mine. The ore from this Jack Pine mine went to Anaconda, and it was transported by railroad from there approximately, let's say 30, 40 miles to a mill at Anaconda. And the mill at Anaconda is in the Blue Water, really irrigation area. And another nearby mill, which was the Homestake Mill, 3 miles to the east of the Anaconda Mill, are really less than 5 to 10 miles from the village of Milan, and that of course Grants. So during the boom of the uranium mining, these mines and mills really created economic opportunities for people that came from probably all over the world, really, to work in this industry. Other mines and mills that occurred in this area of the Grants Mining District was north of Anaconda and Homestake. So you had transnational corporations like the Carnegie Corporation, oil companies like the Phillips Oil Company, Chevron, and Gulf, all mined that area from, again, the 1950s until even into the 1990s. What has occurred then, after even during mining and milling, is environmental impacts. And that are long lasting, because again, radioactivity is harmful both as in disturbance in the ground, and that of course, as you create uranium ore, you create all of uranium ore waste from the milling, and you then have to establish what they call mine mill tailings that cover large expanses of land, and that then totally emit radon gas through the air, and of course then it spreads all over down to especially from west to east. Generally, then the surface gets contaminated both from mining and milling. The groundwater, of course, then also gets contaminated through seepage. But especially during the milling operation, what I saw at Anaconda, for example, was a lot of the mill tailings waste gets both expanded on the ground, but also injected into underground aquifers at thousands of gallons per minute into underground aquifers. So what we see today is radioactive plumes that are in the area of Anaconda, the mill site, and at the Homestake mill site. And even up north to there, to the Homestake, the Homestake and the Carnegie site, again, are being reclaimed. They've become Superfund sites that are managed by the Department of Energy. And so, and sometimes you see mines and just holes in the ground that are radioactive. And I know I've commented out to the New Mexico Environment Department that these are really unprotected. They're unsigned, they're just holes in the ground. and yet highly radioactive. One time when we were in the field with some geologists, he said that he would even have allowed us to go into those holes in the ground because his instrument wouldn't be able to read it. The radioactivity was too high. And but yet these areas are affecting our lives down this way. And what's resulted from all the years of mining and milling is our people that have worked in the mines and the mills have contracted some form of cancer. We've never really known exactly where these cancers come from. And we've really have fought with both the federal government, mainly the EPA, and the New Mexico Environment Department for the lack of failure to do health studies in this region. And we know ourselves, the organizations that are involved here have done some non-scientific studies of all the people that have worked in the mines and the mills that are affected. And they tell horror stories, really, about how they've contracted certain diseases or certain cancers. And some of the efforts from the organizations that I work with, the Multicultural Alliance for a Safe Environment, has attempted to get the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act amended to include mines and mill workers after 1971. And some of our Acoma people have received some form of compensation for having contracted some kind of health problems as working in the mines and the mills. One of the things that I think many people don't know is the children or the wives that had husbands or brothers or families working in the mines and the mills brought home the radioactive contaminated clothing that they used, and or maybe in their lunch boxes, and so that really also contaminated the families. And probably some of these cancers that are now with them occurred as a result of picking up these kinds of radioactivity. And so this is where, again, this is why we really need to talk about as Indigenous peoples. And it's not only, again, the extractive part of uranium that we need to converse upon, because here in New Mexico, as we all have seen, is the development of nuclearism, and we've become the whole, I think, politicians and cities have become addicted to monies from nuclear power. So from the development of the Los Alamos National Laboratories, the Sandia National Laboratories, or all the accumulation of the nuclear warheads that are surrounding Albuquerque in the Manzano Mountains, or the waste isolated pilot plant in Carlsbad, or even the uranium enrichment facility in Eunice, these all bring billions into New Mexico and probably accumulated to trillions. And I remember when President Trump talked about in improving the nuclear capabilities of the United States, I could just see Los Alamos National Laboratory and all the people that gain monetarily from it were salivating and saying, okay, billions are going to come to more billions are going to come to Santa Fe. So it's something that we really need to talk about. Do we want this kind of monies and all of the dangers that come with it? Do we want the Pueblos to really become more, I guess, dependent on these kinds of monies? And I really would like to see the public council get more involved in, for example, the nuclear waste issues that we're now fighting, that will bring nuclear waste from all of the 100+ nuclear power plants in the United States to southern New Mexico. And I would also like to just see more engagement by the Pueblos, who's going to be impacted by the transportation of nuclear waste through their lands. And even I would love to see the Pueblos acting as a sovereign and becoming a party to what's known as the non-proliferation treaty that many nation states throughout the world have signed on to, that really attempts to ban nuclear weapons throughout the world. And I would love to see the Pueblos, become a signatory to that. So
Thanks.
that's where I think that I just want to really end and encourage young people, especially to study nuclear issues and to become engaged with us as indigenous peoples and to communicate with us on this matter.
Thank you for that really in-depth, like that was a lot of history in little bit of time. So thanks for synthesizing all of that for us. Next, we'll turn it back over to Marian. Most of her experience is a little bit more closer to the labs. And so she'll take a minute to kind of talk more about those cultural and land impacts that she's aware of.
Upi'akindi, Ewa To'a, or the Tewa people, were planted in this place as the caretakers of the gifts of air, water, land, and each other. Our ancestors were given the instructions on how to exist within the order of the universe. Our original territory reached from the present New Mexico-Colorado border to the north, the Four Corners area and the Jemez Mountains to the west, north of Albuquerque to the south, the Galisteo Basin, the Sangre de Cristo mountain range to the east. This is the Tewa world. It's our church. Acknowledgement of our church and our purpose has been passed down from the beginning to the present through our daily prayers. I, along with other indigenous native peoples, we come from a long lineage of people who carried wisdom and spiritual awareness as caretakers of this place we call sacred. We call it sacred because energies of creation formed through the powers of oceans, volcanic eruptions, continental rifts, and numerous shifting faults that produced and deposited powerful elements. These natural, powerful elements were to be respected and left undisturbed. This entire area is still in constant movement, a living entity. Knowledge and human mannerisms are required in order to maintain harmonious life in this place. With the rise of the atomic age, indigenous teachings and understandings were grossly disregarded. The US government entered Tewa world without the respect of asking permission and drew upon this very location and the earth elements to create the greatest threat the earth and her inhabitants have known. From the very beginning of the nuclear legacy, my people's lives have been deeply affected without opportunity to share this wisdom bestowed upon the first peoples. I wish to express the fact that Native peoples, Tewa peoples, have an extremely painful history since the Europeans came into our world, our church. They brought murder, rape, another belief system, ownership of land and people, diseases, and the concept of war to a people who were peacekeepers and lived in peace and harmony. We had close to 100 thriving Tewa villages at that time. With great resilience and belief, our ancestors remained. When the US government arrived via anthropologists and movement to the West, our land base dwindled to 6 surviving Tewa villages that are in existence today. This society furthered patriarchy, more diseases, more war. The nuclear legacy brought the concept of money to a people who were sustainable because they could feed ourselves. We could do that. It also brought division by disturbing our sacred sites and working for others for a livelihood. Again, with resilience and belief, we thrive while still being who we are. I pray that this presentation explains in short what is at stake in this unique place. All who now reside here and call it home need clean air, water, and land for survival. Many are sick with cancers of all kinds and diseases that we need to even find new names for them. We cannot afford this kind of man-made contamination as we have little water here in New Mexico. Our prayer is for our government to rethink its mission with the nuclear industry, especially Los Alamos National Laboratory. Money could be used for environmental cleanup for many years to come instead of production of more pits. Our government could be the leader of the world to admit that mistakes have been made by its mission of the atomic bomb in a sacred place and exploding it on its own people, and show the world the process of being responsible and righting the wrongs. An opportunity to stop using the first peoples as a sacrifice. We are of this place, tribal members, New Mexicans, and United States citizens, and want to continue to survive here. It is known in Washington, D.C. that the Southwest, including New Mexico, is a nuclear sacrifice zone. And to turn this tide, we must recognize what is taking place and break out of denial which perpetrates. During the rise of the atomic age, our teachings and understandings were ignored and disregarded in the pursuit of progress. The result of this most disturbing practice is harm and destruction to our home and our people. For the health of this land and its people, we must be practicing a sacred ethic of leave no trace. This is in alignment with how our people have been taught to follow the natural process of order in this creation. This has been ignored and trampled upon. This is not a safe place to have a nuclear weapons production facility. When an accident happens, where will we go? Our government is putting us in a position of continued genocide. Peace is not obtained through creating life-threatening deterrents. The truth is that the forces which have been released during the atomic age place all of us under continual threat. Lano is not deterring war, but life itself. In a short 75 years, many mistakes have been made, but there is opportunity to admit them and change the course to correct these wrongs. We can only back off of this brink of annihilation and reconcile what has taken place over the last 75 years through a dynamic process of truth-telling, naming things as they are. Only then can we move forward on the same page of understanding. So, we have our mannerisms have been just never heard, never listened to, you know, and I think our participation, you know, in this nuclear age or whatever, you know, is not natural to our people, the way that we were made. And unfortunately, the decision by our own holy people when the United States government got here was that we cannot fight what's coming. And we need to become our enemy. and then remember who we are. And that's, I feel that myself and colleagues at this time are being the answers to our ancestors' prayers, because we're talking about this. Look at us, how we talk English better than some white people even. And we've studied those environmental impact statements. You know, we sat across a table with the brightest scientists and on and on and on. You know, we are our enemy. We depend on money, you know. But we need to remember who we are. That's the salvation. That's our salvation. And we need to learn it ourselves and practice it, keep it going, share as much of it that we can in order to return our heaven on earth like it once was, the next circle. So we're far from it. And now we have young, energetic people that need to know the plight that has been going, and we need to learn that weave on how you have to read those environmental impact statements. You need to be involved. You need our voices to be heard. We need to band together and have that same voice. And as we speak, just today, a news release came out because the United States wants to make more pits. Can you imagine that? More plutonium pits at Los Alamos and Savannah River, the place where low-income Black people live, and our 4 villages surrounding the laboratory in our Hispanic community here in Mexico. And the US government, they plan to quadruple the production of the plutonium pits at Los Alamos, Savannah River. And they refuse to fully examine the environmental and safety impacts of this cross-country plan, which would create massive quantities of dangerous and radioactive material, put hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars on the line, risk a new nuclear arms race, and violate the nation's foundational environmental laws. So we need to learn more about it. And I gave Rachel a paper, a news release, so that we can all start learning more about it and become more involved with it. And Petuuch is correct. You know, there is international law about nukes even, and there were 50 countries that signed on that, you know, we can't be doing this anymore. This is insane, you know. Let's be a real human race here.
Yeah, thank you. I did drop into the chat for anybody interested. It's a Google Drive link. I could not figure out the life of me. I supposedly was able to send direct documents to everyone, but I cannot find out how to do it. So the Google Drive will have to do, but you can see the news release that Marian shared with me. So you can download that and read it on your own time, but it's really great. It's about 3-4 pages long. I want to remind everybody that we are accepting questions and we'll answer your questions during this time. I'm going to go ahead and start some questions to our panelists, but feel free to drop those into either the question and answer or the chat. I'll be fielding both of those throughout this. Sorry, lost train of thought. I really just appreciated all the words that both Marian and Petuuch shared with us. I think they covered so much in such a little point of time. But I guess I would like to go back and I think the biggest thing for me is, thinking about this whole nuclear in New Mexico and just how it's affected the land and the people so intensely that I think, like both of you mentioned, there's the difficulties of people being blinded by the wealth or kind of losing the vision of where we're going. But then also there's the opportunities that our people have had to gain better educations. Like I think about Laguna and how, some of that mining really created more of an infrastructure for people to receive more education. So I think I would like to start off asking each of you, and maybe Marian, if you don't mind starting, just in like maybe a couple sentences, maybe highlight what the major thing that you feel might be viewed as a positive and one as a negative from nuclear science being in New Mexico. I know that's a difficult question, but maybe if there's just one of each of those so we can kind of compare those positives and negatives.
Well, for myself, being a traditional potter and a woman, and going back to the potters that I learned from, that's when money came to this part of the world. We didn't have money before the 1890s. There was no such thing as money. The lifestyle was sustainable, growing food and all. And the first people actually that were able to make a good living were the potters because of the digs that they did in our sacred place. And Maria Martinez from San Ildefonso become very famous, potter, and the Palace of the Governors. And the potters at that time were all from Santa Clara, and she couldn't make all those pots for the market. So my grandma and other women potters that I had the opportunity to sit with had these amazing stories of their pottery wares. And the Pueblo pottery women were the ones who could make that money just by, sitting and doing the pots. So I guess that was a plus for survival during our time, And it was also a plus for a matriarch to be recognized as it is, that truth.
Yeah,
So.
that's definitely very true. Thank you, Marian. And Petuuch, would you like to throw in your thoughts on, a positive and negative, kind of funneling it down to your major points?
Sure. I mean, it's the same story as Marianne's about community development. The benefits that are produced generally as a result of capitalism, the monies, and even when I compare our sister Pueblo and Acoma, if you just compare those in terms of community development and education, you see the more, I suppose, educated people at Laguna Pueblo, because the government from the mines and revenues received were able to then provide scholarships to their students, and even per capita payments. So generally, there's economic progress more intense than at Acoma. And but on the counterside of it is the environmental degradation that you still see today as a result of the mines that took place there. The people who farmed the area there, their land is affected by radioactivity. The surface water that flows from upstream to downstream into the Rio San Jose is affected, and today it's still been studied as to what kind of radioactive contamination are in the stream beds and in the water quality. So generally, it's really, it's always this, I suppose, two side effects, both the good and the bad. The good as a result of the community development, but the bad side of it is the health and environmental damage that we still face today.
Yes, this was a great time for division. Exactly what the whole plot was division. And they sure knew how to divide our people by giving some people this, the haves and the have-nots, by taking us away from our sacred place, disturbing our sacred place, and that whole division thing, it just made us another people. And we're still in that situation now. How do we put ourselves together, and be on the same page and not divide everything to a winter and summer? We have a whole year of seasons that we need to survive, Don't divide us. We need to understand internally, that we need to band together, put ourselves back into our family, and recognize that the government, when they came here, they sure knew how to do division. Even the bomb, they divided clear down to a one cell atom, cut it in half to disintegrate, destroy life, everything. That's how deep it is.
I really appreciate that visual, Marian, because, when you're thinking about nuclear, just that understanding of like what we're talking about when we're talking about the drive and what the whole science is about. The science is about splitting an atom apart.
Exactly.
Really what has happened in the history of what we're doing. I also felt like coming back to something and maybe putting in my 2 cents, and it's kind of on a unrelated topic, but I think it's interesting that, when you're talking about money coming into the land and just kind of people's clamor for that, I think it's crazy, or for me, since we have kind of a mixed audience, we have Indigenous people and Native and non-Native people tuning in. And, I've been approached by a lot of people that just kind of assume that because we're Native, we get money for X, Y, and Z. And that's just something that's not true. And because, the biggest example is, I come from Hopi, and, my people are very poor out there, and they're just like, oh, you get a weekly stipend. And I was like, my cousins do, because they're not registered at Hopi, but and so like, these communities have been separated, but I also kind of want to bring that together, mentioning that money thing, but also mentioning and tying it back in together with that bringing together of people, and what your work, both of your work, is really about, of bringing people together to be one voice. We have the All Pueblo Council of Governors that, is meant to be a unified voice for the 1920 Pueblos in New Mexico and Texas. And just, Marian, your son works here at the Culture Center, and we've been able to chat, and just, he's mentioned, he's like, oh yeah, I'm related to the Hopi Tewas. And I was like, hey, I found out I'm Hopi Tewa. And so it's just, we're all family, and, people, we move around, and, we're all about building that family and community. And I hope that we can maintain that. But I do want to turn back over to some of these questions. Again, feel free to drop those into the question and answer or the chat. So first, directed at Petuuch, since you're working with the United Nations, Dana Lee has asked, has the United Nations nuclear ban that was passed earlier this year given any support through this document to the communities?
In terms of how?
Maybe
which is support. Well, I mean, it's the 9 nuclear armed states, are refusing to sign on to it because it threatens their supremacy and power. But then what the rest of the majority, the 150, all the countries, the rest of the world that are probably non-nuclear weaponry states, are signing on to it, and they're trying to prevent the nation states from developing atomic bombs. So really, I think it's the power of international persuasion that's definitely needed in getting, China, the United States, all these nuclear weapon states to stop building smart bombs, or what Marian was talking about, the plutonium pit triggers. And it's not only foolish and dangerous, but it's a terrible sin against humanity that you're going down this route of developing these kinds of arsenals and weaponry to kill people. So we've got to include that kind of, I think, a dimension into it, that it's against humanity to really build these kinds of weaponry to destroy land and the lives of people.
It's so shameful. Oh, dear Lord, it's so shameful that our country is the only country that has used it on people. On people, not way in Japan, but here in New Mexico, the Trinity test, the first atomic weapon made at Los Alamos, and they blasted it. Who was here in 1945? 19 pueblos, 2 Apache tribes, part of the Navajo Nation, the Spanish farmers, and the white Anglo ranchers, the land-based people, their own people.
I like what you're bringing up, Marian. And that reminds me of this other question. Maybe if you, I think we've touched on it here and there, but just kind of reconciling a Pueblo perspective of some of like the most humble people that I've ever known, and just a peaceful people in our long history, and also just our understanding of the earth and knowing, you know, that there's a balance to everything. And, you know, there's all of these values that go into how we exist in this world as Pueblo people. And maybe you can start off telling us a little bit more about how could we reconcile that understanding and remembering of who we are with what has actually happened? Like, how do we bring those two worlds together?
Well, I think it's really on how you start your day. You know, our first manner, you know, is that sun, that tamsado that comes up every morning, and to be a human and alive, and that mannerism of greeting of a good morning and asking for a good day, and make yesterday was yesterday. Make my body with my eyes and my ears and my nose and my heart and my talk. Be good today. Who are you going to send me? What do I need to learn today? And be open to those teachings of the ancestors, because those are the mannerisms on how we know what's sacred, and how we put back what we take, those kinds of things. And for everybody to know where you are, because there is a spirit world, and they're here, and they watch over us. That's our belief. And it's even scientific proof. When our body dies, that energy is still here. It's scientifically proven. You know, our ancestors already knew that. That's why our native religion is what it is. You know, we feed a year later, we wait those 4 days, all those things, they're real. But to allow the non-native folks, those little things that if you want to live and reside and be here in our ancestral territory, wake up tomorrow and just tell them how happy and glad you are to be in this place. Recognize this as a sacred place, and be open to their teachings and to help guide. Prayer.
Thank you, Marian. Petuuch, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, almost the same thing as Marian is thinking about, the importance of spirituality. I believe, you know, in the importance of interrelationships, that humans are all really connected to each other. So, you know, this is why indigenous people's view and philosophy is all my relatives. You know, it's one human to another human. But it's not only humans that when we say all my relatives, you know, it's everything that this Great Spirit has created on our Mother Earth, you know, the earth itself, you know, the living beings on that earth that we are related to. And this importance of a responsibility to each other, responsibility to humans, but humans to the spirit world, to the humans, to the natural world, and that we need to take care of each other. And that's why I believe that it's important that we talk so much about understanding and respecting each other and trying to come together in what I like to say as living together in a manner of a peaceful coexistence. That's our challenge.
Thank you. We're going to be wrapping up, so I have one last question before we wrap up, and this is from Jeanne Elmhorst. She asks, what organizations could we get involved with that are the most effective at addressing this issue? And I know, Petuuch, you're affiliated with a number of organizations, so maybe you can start us off.
Okay, if you really want to learn a little bit more about what our organization, the Multicultural Alliance for Safe Environment, does and who we are, the website is swuranium.org. Is our website, swuranium.org. But in terms of looking at the whole nuclear fuel chain, you know, I mean, there's multiple organizations globally, but can look at the ones in the United States beyond nuclear. NEIS, Nuclear Energy Information Services, David Kraft, and even like all the many media announcements, Nuke Watch, I think is one, and there's others, but you just simply then have to Google probably nuclear power.
I would say that many of these organizations have been around for a long time. There's all you young people out there. Let's start some new ones. We can afford some new energy, some new life, some add-on voices, you know, let's grow. Make some more of these babies, you know, produce some more organizations to have the same voice and learn and teach each other and band together in a peaceful way, in a loving way. Learn how to love, respect, and care for one another so that things will go well. That's in our prayers, like Petuuch said. So there's room to make more, create more, you know, and learn from the ones who've been around for a long time. You can, you know, do the research. You can ask anybody in these organizations to assist you. You know, all of them are open to it. There's Hope, Honor Our Pueblo Existence. There's Tewa Women United. There's Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety. There's Communities for Clean Water. There's, you know, the ones that Petuuch mentioned. So, yay.
Thank you. One that I know you just didn't, but I know Pueblo Action Alliance is also out there doing a lot of stuff. If you're tied into a little bit more of the land, they do broader stuff than just uranium. So thank you guys both for participating today and sharing your guys' knowledge. I just wanted to let everybody know, everybody that's registered for today's panel or for today's discussion. Oh man, my links don't transfer over. Let me just copy this over. Sorry, I'm going to be talking and linking at the same time. So not the best at multitasking. But if you're registered for this, then you might have be already registered for the next one in the series. The next one is part 3 of 3. And we'll be talking a little bit more about current impacts and get some personal stories. I'm hoping to bring in our one of our artists into that discussion. So stay tuned for more information on that. Again, it's on a Wednesday night. And again, today's recordings will be posted online within a week. I'm kind of in charge of that. So you can check out our website. It's indianpueblo.org/counternarrative. Through that website, you can access a couple past counter narratives, including session 1. If you haven't viewed that, you're welcome to go back and view that. And then the last thing I would like to encourage you, we appreciate you tuning in for our free event. And we really are reliant on donations, especially during this time, because I mean, we have limited capacity. We are now open now. If you guys get a chance, book your tickets online to view our museum. We actually have an exhibit in our center right now that is by DeHaven Solomon Chaffins about uranium mining. Really beautiful work. She's from Laguna. So anyways, all of your support is appreciated, whether it's soliciting an extra visit from you to our museum, or a donation, or even a membership. So anything you can do to support and kind of pay forward for us to continue doing these programs is much appreciated. With that, I hope you guys all have an enjoyable evening, and many blessings to all of you. And if Marian or Petuuch want to say their final goodbye, I'll give them a second.
No, everybody just be safe and get involved. Like we're all encouraging. Thanks.
Awesome.